All right, Draft Theory and War by Ryan Torner. This basically allows us to understand the next move of invaders and countries. It allows us to tell that maybe they have spies who know information about different regions, and maybe that's the reason why they're attacking those regions, and also gives us a better historical perspective. Now, looking at the setup, I'm going to be looking at Hitler's invasion in Luxembourg, Netherlands, Belgium, and France. And we're going to first set this up as a draft. Now, in this draft, it's basically all equal nodes relative to population or major regions, basically Belgium and Luxembourg being two big countries. And what happens is that these are the main regions we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be looking at the properties of all these nodes, not their edges, but at the nodes themselves, and why Hitler might be focusing on some nodes for their properties rather than other nodes. So what properties are we talking about? First, military strength. So this is kind of in divisions. In the regions that don't have a number next to them, this isn't their... they just had a really small amount of infantry at the time, so they're really they don't really matter at all. Luxembourg also really didn't have much of a military, so that's why it's at 0. And these per division is around 20,000 troops. So like in here, this is like 200,000 troops. And what happens is this kind of just shows you the military personnel, and the main thing you want to keep from this is that the right side, the north, the top right corner of France, which is kind of right here, is where a majority of their army was. Now, red, kind of a military resource, is also coal. So these were the regions in France at the time that were being mined for coal, and where most of the coal mines are even today. So, was Hitler going after these regions in France in order to get coal? Another thing might be is population size. So part of Hitler's strategy with blitzkriegs was to loot areas and to try to take their resources as a way to support more military conquest. And 3, more than 1 million, which is a lot, usually urban populations. 2 is 1 million, these are usually just smaller. And 1, which is 100,000 to 500,000, these are really small countries like Luxembourg or really rural areas that didn't have a lot of people. Now, when we look at his actual order of conquest, rather than going into the details, you can look at this if you want to pause the video, but the main thing you need to keep in mind is that he first went through Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Belgium, and then kind of went through the left side of France, and then eventually attacked near the right side of France. Then once he took Paris, kind of the rest fell really fast. Now, really what we need to think about from this is that how does this apply to algorithms, and how does this apply to understanding why Hitler went to the places that he did? Now, what you need to realize is most of the algorithms we've been looking at are trying to figure out the fastest distance between point A and point B. But in this case, we're really thinking more about the properties of the actual nodes. So what's the easiest way to conquer an area based on the properties of its nodes? Not, okay, what's the distance between each place? And when we kind of look back and think about things, population shows more of the way Hitler kind of invaded through the areas. And the reason why is because he was also trying to dodge kind of the military that France had. And it kind of explains why he went through Luxembourg, Netherlands, and then Belgium first off, and then came into France as a way to not have to go directly through the German-French border. Now, this allows us to think about how in this case of draft theory concepts, we're looking more at kind of an algorithm or a military strategy that relies less on kind of the distance to the target. So his distance to France, if he wanted to go straight into France, he would go through a chunk of military. But he was more worried about the properties of the nodes, aka how much military was in one place, and kind of went for this backstab maneuver against France's army. And what we can kind of discern from this is that if we're taking kind of a draft theory perspective, what was more focused on was the weight of the nodes rather than the weight of the edges, or aka the distance between two places. Now also, why would we use draft theory to explain this? Why don't we just, hire a general or whatever? Well, the reason why is because I think draft theory gives us a better explanation as to looking at the actual numbers of the regions and kind of understand the geography much more in an easy to understand way, rather than looking at, what is Hitler after, and trying to look at other factors. We can use draft theory to basically figure out the different regions and their properties to understand it. Also, rather than looking at conjecture of this is what Hitler's strategy was, or Hitler's master plan, we can really just look at where did he go and what were the properties of those areas.